my friends, what renewed joy we find in meeting once again, even though mediated by this box of lights and sounds that prodigiously shortens the vast distances that separate us in time and space. I remember, with the clarity that only truly meaningful memories possess, an afternoon in my tower at Bollingen, that stone refuge I built with my own hands, a place where the soul could breathe away from the bustle of the world. I was observing the lake, its waters mirroring the autumn sky, and meditating on the slow but inexorable dance of nature. The leaf that breaks away, the cycle of tides, the stone that yields to the embrace of moss. And it occurred to me, with a clarity that was both luminous and somewhat melancholic, how we human beings so frequently resist this same transformative dance in our own lives. We long for perennial well-being, for happiness without cracks, for a garden where flowers never wither. And when the storm reaches us, whether it be an unexpected betrayal at work, to which we dedicated ourselves so much, the loss of a family bond we thought indestructible, or even the gradual erosion of a cherished dream, we feel as if the very axis of the world had split. This incessant search for immutable stability, for a life shielded against the storms of existence, is, in itself, a source of profound and ironic suffering. For life, in its purest essence, my dear ones, is incessant movement, continuous transformation, the complex and sometimes disconcerting interplay of the multiple spheres of our being, from the densest matter to the most subtle spirit. Today, my friends, I want us to dive together, with the courage that truth demands, into one of those abysses of the human soul that so disturb us, a question that echoes through the corridor of time, whispered in moments of anguish and perplexity. How does the great mystery, this force that some call God, others destiny, or the very cosmic order itself, deal with those who inflict pain upon us, who wound us at the core of our being? Be certain, I do not bring you a catechetical sermon, nor a simplistic formula of consolation. What I propose to you is something more arduous and, I dare say, more rewarding. A fearless psychological exploration of the unfathomable depths of our shared experience. Let us begin, then, by admitting, without detours or euphemisms, a universal truth, however uncomfortable it may prove to our sensibility. Human betrayal, this shadow that hovers over the most sacred relationships. Who among us, in some corner of their history, has not felt the ice of disappointment coming from hands that once caressed, from voices that once consoled? A friend who in the hour of need reveals himself to be a self-interested stranger, a love that swore eternity and dissolves like mist at the first contrary wind. A colleague in whom we place trust and who, stealthily, undermines our foundations. These moments, how they tear the veil of our naivety. They force us into a brutal confrontation, not only with the fallibility of the other, but with our own vulnerability, with our capacity, perhaps, to judge poorly, to idealize, to surrender ourselves without the due armor of prudence. We feel the ground flee from under our feet, and the world, once so familiar, suddenly seems a hostile and treacherous place. And then, inevitably, like thunder in a blue sky, explodes the piercing question, a cry born from the entrails of our existential perplexity. Why? Why do individuals who sow discord, who act with an almost calculated cruelty, with a malice that seems so evident to us, why do they sometimes seem not only to escape unscathed, but even to prosper, accumulate power, reap the laurels of an apparent victory, while we, the supposed victims, carry the heavy burden of pain, injustice, incomprehension? We see the manipulator climb positions of prominence, the egoist amass fortunes, the slanderer be applauded, and a just revolt, a holy indignation can inflame our chest, threatening to consume us in its impotent fury. We question the order of the universe, the very notion of justice, and a bitter taste of cynicism can begin to cloud our vision of life. But it is precisely here, in this shadowy valley where revolt and despair threaten to swallow us, that my path, the perspective I have humbly cultivated throughout a life dedicated to listening to the whispers and screams of the psyche, deviates from the path of simple indignation or the search for divine revenge. I have learned, my dear ones, not in dogmatic theology books, but in countless hours of silent confidence, in attentive listening to the most secret pains of the human soul, and, no less important, in my own fierce internal battles, in my own dives into darkness, that suffering, however unjust and arbitrary it may present itself to our limited consciousness, can be, and frequently is, a portal, yes, a narrow portal sometimes painful to cross, but one that opens to psychological growth of unsuspected depth, to a vaster, more compassionate understanding of ourselves and the intricate fabric of reality. Pain, my friends, is not merely a punishment inflicted by a capricious divinity, but a thunderous call, an urgent alarm from the psyche for us to turn our gaze inward, to dare confront and integrate that which for so long has been neglected, repressed, feared. Today, then, I invite you not to a simple lecture but to an audacious expedition to the core of the soul, to understand apparent divine justice not as a celestial tribunal with an implacable judge with a white beard, but as an intrinsic process, immanent to the psyche itself, a cosmic dance of balance and compensation that manifests through the complex and fascinating laws of depth psychology. Let us embark together on this journey, with open mind and willing heart, and perhaps, just perhaps, we can emerge on the other side with a new and deeper meaning for the wounds that life inevitably inflicts upon us. To unravel this apparent paradox, to begin to glimpse the hidden logic behind the apparent chaos, we must first familiarize ourselves with intimacy and without fear, with a concept I consider angular in the architecture of the psyche, the shadow. Each one of us, without the slightest exception, carries with them this invisible companion, this other face of our inner moon. It is the repository, the vast and often neglected basement of our personality, where we accumulate all those qualities, those impulses, those potentialities that, for one reason or another, whether by our education, by the injunctions of prevailing morality, or by our own fearful conscious choices, were banished from the living room of our consciousness. Aspects we consider rude or socially unacceptable, instincts we judge primitive or aggressive, traits of selfishness that contradict our altruistic self-image, hints of envy that shame us, temptations of laziness that challenge our ideal of productivity. But also, and this is crucial that you understand, the shadow does not contain only the evil or the negative. It can harbor unlived potentialities, dormant talents, perhaps an assertiveness that was repressed for being considered inappropriate to our gender or social position, or an artistic sensitivity that was mocked in childhood and therefore painfully hidden. Everything that does not align with the idealized image we construct of ourselves, or with the persona, this social mask we carefully present to the world to be accepted, loved and recognized, is relegated to this dark but incredibly vibrant and energetic territory of the psyche. And what is repressed, my dear ones, does not disappear as if by magic. On the contrary, it gains a life of its own, a stealthy autonomy, operating in the shadows of our consciousness, influencing our moods, our choices, and fundamentally, our relationships. And how does this shadow, this repressed and frequently misunderstood psychic energy manifests in our lives, in cunning and frequently painful ways. One of its most common and impactful manifestations is the phenomenon of projection. With a clarity that borders on absolute certainty, and an indignation that can inflame our being, we see in others, especially in those who hurt us, who betray us, who cause us a deep and inexplicable discomfort, precisely those shadowy qualities that we refuse to recognize in ourselves. The person who seems insufferably arrogant to us may be mirroring a secret arrogance we do not admit to possessing. The colleague we see as lazy and irresponsible may be activating a part of us that yearns for rest and freedom, but which we repress ferociously in the name of duty. The individual we consider cruel and insensitive may be embodying a capacity for coldness or aggressiveness that resides, dormant and denied, in our own intimacy. This, I repeat and underline with all emphasis, does not serve in any way to justify the aggressor's act, nor to dilute their moral or legal responsibility. Far from it. The evil inflicted is real and must be recognized as such. But understanding this projection mechanism offers us a golden key, an invaluable tool, to understand the complex energetic dynamic that is established in these painful encounters, to understand why that specific person, with that particular behavior, hits us so viscerally, so disproportionately perhaps, while others, acting similarly, may cause us only slight annoyance. And these encounters, my friends, believe me, are rarely the work of mere chance, of the blind game of destiny. Early in my investigations into the mysteries of the soul, I was deeply captivated and intrigued by what I called synchronicity. This mysterious and meaningful occurrence of two or more events that, at first glance, do not possess a direct linear causal connection, like the one we know in the physical world, but which connect intimately through a common meaning, through an archetypal resonance that points to an underlying order in reality. Destructive encounters, those collisions with the other that shake us to the foundations of the soul, that confront us with pain and disappointment, can and should be viewed under this revealing lens of synchronicity. They are not mere slips of destiny, fortuitous accidents on a chaotic and meaningless road, but precise synchronizations orchestrated with a wisdom that far transcends our rational and conscious understanding, by our deepest unconscious, aimed at propelling our development, forcing us to look at what we avoid. It is as if the psyche, in its incessant and innate search for totality, for the integration of all its parts, surgically placed us before situations, and crucially, before people who mirror, who vividly embody, that which in us desperately cries out to be brought to the light of consciousness, to be recognized, understood, and finally, integrated. This leads us naturally to the fundamental idea of psychic compensation. The psyche, this wise and ancient elder who inhabits each one of us, incessantly seeks balance, homeostasis, just as a natural ecosystem self-regulates to maintain its internal harmony. Our inner landscape yearns for a state of completeness and dynamic balance. When we identify excessively with one of the poles of existence, with light, with idealized goodness, with the socially approved persona, and we ferociously repress any trace of what we consider darkness or inadequacy, we, paradoxically, create an internal imbalance that can attract external experiences that force us to confront and integrate our own capacity for evil, or rather, for our totality, which includes both light and shadow, if we are, so to speak, too good, too naive, or excessively passive. Life, through sometimes brutal encounters, can present us with the opposite face, so that we learn to develop strength and discernment, the capacity to say no, to impose healthy limits. It is as if the psyche tells us through these painful events, You need to know your integral strength, your capacity to defend yourself, to assert yourself, and for this, you may need to experience the impact of what you most fear or reject, in yourself and in others. Thus, each betrayal, each wound inflicted, however heart-rending it may be in the moment, carries with it a hidden purpose, a coded message from our deepest unconscious, an invitation into self-exploration. It reveals, like an X-ray of the soul, aspects of ourselves that we neglect, that we fear, that we underestimate, or that we simply completely ignored. The person who hurts us, who deeply disappoints us, may be, in a way, totally unconscious to them and to us, representing a part of our own shadow that cries out for recognition, for dialogue, for integration. Instead of just cursing the darkness of the other, we are vehemently invited to undertake the courageous journey of exploring our own shadowy regions, not with the objective of becoming evil or cynical, but to become complete, whole, more conscious of our complex and rich humanity. It is arduous work, I do not deceive you, work that requires implacable honesty and a great dose of humility. But it is essential, indispensable work for the true journey of the soul toward its realization. And it is precisely here that pain, previously seen as an enemy to be avoided at all costs, reveals itself in its most surprising facet, not as an end in itself, but as an imperious call, a powerful catalyst for the process I call, with profound reverence, the process of individuation.